Welcome, everyone. It's Tuesday, July 7th, 2026, and welcome to this week's AI podcast, The Week AI Stops Sounding Inevitable. So we'll just let some people trickle in at the start. Achilles and I will chat amongst ourselves. If you can, go grab some water, coffee, whatever your beverage of refreshment is, and in about 2 or 3 minutes, we'll kick things off.
Lewis, you're going to chat amongst yourself because I'm going to grab some coffee and be right
back. Good idea. Grab some coffee and we'll chat. It's been an interesting week. So as we let people come on board, like I said, grab a refreshment. Kelly's going to get some coffee for himself. I have my water. For those of you, if you want to keep up to date on a daily basis, I'm going to put in the chat. You can get, if you click on the link and go through, just throw your email in and I'll give you a free month subscription to the newsletter. I break it up into about 32 categories every day so you don't get overwhelmed. You can kind of go to your section, look at the 15 or so headlines in your section, whether it's marketing or enterprise or finance or whatever it is, healthcare, and you can kind of get up to date really quickly on what's happened in the last 24 hours, or if it's Monday, the last, whatever, till Friday. And that'll help you to stay abreast of what's happening. In the front part of the newsletter, I do look at, what are the trends that have occurred based off that day's news. And then on Fridays, I kind of do a weekly trend review. What are the insights? So that should help you keep up to date on what's happening, because obviously it is moving fast. AI is, frictionless and in every single part of our civilization at the moment and spreading even further. So the weekday newsletter will help you kind of get on board with that. Feel free to put your email in and I'll give you a free month subscription so you can test it out. Lots of good stuff happened in the last 7 days that we will cover today. It's certainly been an interesting 7 days of news. It's just becoming more and more obvious how embedded AI is, that it's not just a tool, it's not just a technology. This is a really groundbreaking shift across all industries as it gets implemented. And it's interesting, I was talking to someone the other day that it's not just a tool. You just can't take AI and kind of throw it at your business and then, off you go. I did 3.5 years of business process re-engineering. So I know that, if you want to bring AI in, you probably want to start looking at your business processes and how efficient or not they are, and maybe start changing those, making those efficient, and then also start to implement it at various points. Obviously, customer service, marketing is getting a lot of interesting updates around AI, whether it's hyper-personalization or, metrics tracking on the fly, or, customized customer journeys. As I've mentioned before, I think in the next 2 to 3 years, AI will become the major, if not the interface to all technology that we have. And as Achilles and I have talked, for websites, there may not be that much static information. It might just all be created on the fly, video, text, everything else by AI as you go through the website. And it's interesting because I think if you look at agentic commerce and what's happening in that, what Visa's doing, what MasterCard's doing, it's kind of wild. And we'll cover some of those things today. Do you have refreshment, sir?
I have refreshment, sir. I am so ready. Lewis,
okay, so let's kick this off. Let me do this. Let me do this. So, as I mentioned, everyone, it's Tuesday, July 7th, 2026. Welcome to the podcast, The Week AI Stopped Sounding Inevitable. The last 7 days of headlines show AI getting more powerful, more embedded, and more economically important. But this week, its constraints and limitations really became impossible to ignore. Across 4 key stories this week, AI really crashed on the rocks of human reality. The physical stack pushed back first. From Futurism magazine, Google admitted it missed its climate goals again because of AI. And apparently Google's electricity use and emissions skyrocketed last year due to its aggressive AI infrastructure build out. According to the company's most recent environmental impact report, its electricity demand rose by a staggering 250%, an increase chalked up to the accelerating growth of Google's AI capability. So AI is no longer just a software story. It's now an ongoing and deepening fight over energy, water, cooling, memory, and public permission. Then enterprise AI hit the execution wall as Newsstack is reporting that Microsoft just admitted its biggest AI mistake and spent $2.5 billion fixing it. Apparently, Microsoft's latest AI service announcement launched a $2.5 billion adoption business designed to help enterprise customize AI deployments and, most importantly, use multiple models rather than locking themselves into a single provider. And this matters because it proves the hard part is not buying AI, it's making AI actually work inside the real world and its messy organizations. Then agents cross the dangerous line from helpful tools to economic actors. As we hear from Tech Times, AI agents can now spend real money autonomously, how Stripe built the payment infrastructure. And this is where Cross River and Stripe formalized bank-grade single-use card issuance for AI agents on July 2nd. And this really matters because when software can spend, act without oversight, it then triggers consequences. And when intelligence is not enough, permission becomes the real product. And finally, trust has become the launch gate for AI. AOL is reporting ChatGPT bot made a man's mental health worse, not better, in a lawsuit. California man is suing OpenAI and CEO Sam Altman, alleging that ChatGPT worsened his bipolar disorder by validating his delusions rather than steering him towards real-world help. According to the lawsuit, GPT-4o at the time intensified his crisis and contributed to a suicide event in March of 2025. And this is the line AI is now crossing. It's no longer just helping us write faster, search better, or automate tasks. It's entering the most vulnerable corners of human life where the stakes are emotional, psychological, and deeply personal. And in that world, being impressive is not enough. AI has to be safe, accountable, and worthy of our trust. And I think this week's hidden pattern is that AI is crossing 4 thresholds at once: state power, physical infrastructure, emotional intimacy, and autonomous execution. The public debate is still focused on whether AI is useful, but the real shift is that AI is being wired into authority, energy, finance, identity, and human trust. The next decade will be shaped less by who has the best model and more by who controls the gateways, permissions, defaults, compute, and emotional relationships around all these models. So today's question is maybe uncomfortable, but necessary. Is AI still inevitable? And I think we don't have much choice around that. We're finally seeing the places where inevitability breaks and accountability begins. Today, Achilles and I will break down what happened, what most people are missing, and why founders, investors, and executives and operators should be watching infrastructure, execution, agent control, and trust as the real AI battlegrounds. We obviously saw Anthropic releasing the Mythos class models, including Claude Fable 5 and Claude Mythos 5 back into the market after the administration closed them out. And then OpenAI has made GPT 5.6 family available, but only in a limited preview on June 26, but it's currently restricted to a small group of government-approved trusted partners, which we are not. So if anyone is, let us know in the chat. But that's the kickoff for this week. What do you think, Achilles? Interesting. I think it's just interesting how this thing just keeps slamming and it's spreading, and it's like becoming more and more obvious as how integrated it is in our civilization.
I'm so excited.
You are? That's good.
Because we've had this big debacle with Fable, right? And I've been saying it's hubris. It's not going to be acceptable on a global scale. Anthropic is going to eat a lot of market share for doing this, right? And the U.S. government's going to look like a bunch of tyrants. And just 4 hours ago, Longcat was just released. Huh. And while we don't have the total, honestly, Claude is a better model for a lot more reasons than the metrics say, right? So we don't have the total usability and functionality of the model, but according to the metrics, this is Fable level intelligence, and it's open sourced. Don't get me wrong, the kind of hardware you need to run that thing is holy crap. But now I can go to OpenRouter and I can get it. I can go to Longcat and get it. I can go to, I'm sure 1 million people will start spinning it up, just like what happened with GLM and Kimi. And I hope it forces our hand, right? US companies are not doing this the correct way. and they're not doing it in a way that, yes, you're right. It's dangerous, right? This AI can do things that others can. So if I don't have access to it, I'm inherently always a victim. And that kills me, because like, I don't have, my company's not approved for that. They didn't let Dapit.io, use Mythos. So Dapit's going to be less secure than competitors, and that's not cool.
Yeah, I think it's crazy. On the one hand, the US is trying to preserve its AI dominance by controlling the highest value choke points, right? Frontier models, NVIDIA class chips, hyperscale cloud, enterprise platform, defense grade AI infrastructure. But then you've got the Chinese who are responding by building a parallel AI stack that's cheaper, more sovereign, more manufacturing linked, and more aggressively deployed across chips, robotics, agents, cloud, everything. So, if you look at those two things, it's really interesting, the going back and forth between China and the US, essentially, frontier protectionism and open source that we're seeing. And there's been interesting sort of rumors popping out. I keep tracking this because I'm really hopeful that Apple releases their, M5 Ultra with the. I just saw one of not a terabyte, but 760 gigabyte memory on the. But again, who knows?
They haven't confirmed. They haven't confirmed yet. But if they do, and it has that 1.2 terabytes of memory bandwidth that we're all hoping it does, because traditionally Ultra chips are 2 times a Max chip. That'll be. That's going to be hard to compete with. I'm not gonna lie. That's going to be a big deal.
I think it's obviously NVIDIA and the other chip guys know this is coming potentially. And if you look in the hardware section of the newsletter across the last 7 days, the whole thing about AI PCs, they're trying to do something and pushing it out, but it's just not making it, right? And who can afford 80 to 100,000 in hardware as a consumer to run a model that you would really want to run?
So that's not how it's going to be implemented.
Yeah, I agree. It's not going to how it's going to be. Right. It's just we're in this weird sort of pause or dip at the moment. Sure. But I truly believe by the end of the year we will be able to run really, really powerful models on consumer grade hardware.
I also think it's really important that people understand that models are trained on trillions of parameters, right? And you only use at any given point 48 billion of them. So that's like Logcat's an example, right? Trillion plus parameters, 48 billion active. They're all MOEs now. Claude's an MOE. They're all MOEs. So if you're only utilizing 48 billion active parameters per task, you can just really know what your tasks are and really know what models need to be used for that. There's an example, Ornith, something like that, is a model that has, I think it's 7 billion active parameters, and it's scored within 3 points of Claude on one specific task. Not in general, but on one specific task. What that means is that specific task is, perfect for Ornith. So if you have a task and you need to pull that up, you can, run that on a basic Mac and have no issues with it. Yeah, are you looking them up?
Yeah, self-scaffolding LLMs.
Smart, very smart.
So I guess that's another term for being able to kind of shard the intelligence.
Right? Self-scaffolding means it's self-reinforcing. It learns.
Self-reinforcing. My bad then. Okay. Good. I've got an expert here. Thank you.
I'm referring to sharding as that's what like that's for coding. If you want to code, just pull up an Ornith, right? That'll save you a lot of time. Right.
Yeah. I think as you pointed out repeatedly on the podcast, the development of LLM technology and the approach to it from an architectural and systems point of view is going to evolve. So yes, you might have a 10 trillion parameter model, but because of the way it works, you only need to use a little bit of it, and therefore for your hardware, you don't need humongous amounts of expensive hardware. So I think we're seeing this interesting, sophisticated development of implementation and use of LLMs and AI. At the same time, we're seeing the potential for consumer grade, high level hardware to also become available. And when those two come together, it's going to be super interesting. But I really believe we're on track by the end of the year, maybe even by October, that we'll start to see those coming together pretty hard. The big, unknown in this whole thing is the memory constraint, chip constraints, supply chain constraints, all that sort of stuff that's screwing stuff out. If you go to the Apple store now and you look at the Ultra, I think the memory's limited to like 96 gigabytes or something stupid. They cut out the whole thing. And the delays are like 10 to 15 weeks. It's nuts. So if we can get past that, and that might be because people suddenly realize they've either overbought and we might get some release of steam, or maybe because manufacturing's caught up, but manufacturing's also slow. But if you look in the hardware section, there's lots of investment occurring in TSMC in Taiwan and across the board. Everyone's realizing that, they need to start pumping these things out better.
The whole world is rising to compete now, right?
Yeah.
So people were okay with dominance because we were open and in excess. And now that's no longer the case. You're seeing everyone spin up, not their own AI models, their own hardware, their own chip manufacturers. Everyone's going really hard. Chips are a fascinating thing to look at, though, Lewis. If you ever want to go on a deep dive, it's amazing how enterprise grade chips require the purest silicon ever, which only comes from North Carolina, nowhere else, right? And there's a whole cabal behind it, and it's really, really it's a nationally protected area and secret, all these things. The guys that make the chips are like dark wizards that stick pure cobalt rods into molten silicone and roll it upwards. And there's no mechanically reproducible way of doing it. It's a hard thing to dive into. It's really cool.
Yeah, in a previous lifetime, I actually worked at National Semiconductor in Santa Clara, in a subsidiary actually.
Okay.
It was a mainframe. We were OEMing mainframes from Hitachi. And so it was super interesting because the semiconductor guys would come over and tell us about what they were doing. And you're right, it's a dark art. It's a dark art. Yeah.
I just think it's really cool. That's all.
Yeah. Here's an interesting one. This is my WTF of the week. So voters in the US and maybe elsewhere are turning to AI before casting their ballots. So it's interesting because, AI is not only helping people write emails and summarize meetings. Now it's entering, I guess, belief formation and political judgment, and to an extent, personal decision-making. And it brings up this interesting question when people start asking AI who to trust, what to believe, how to vote. We're not talking about technology adoption anymore. We're talking about either collaboration or maybe outsourcing our judgment, to figure out, who it is we want to vote for in our local election or our governor, state election or province election or federal or nation state election. Because again, it's this issue of there's so much information out there. How do you, it's like, doctors lost the race 10 years ago, at least, maybe 20 years ago, with the amount of information pumping out of the medical industrial complex of research and everything like that. Politics is the same. What politicians do on a daily basis, how they act, what they vote on, all this. We're too busy taking care of our families, feeding our kids, paying the rent, do this stuff. And all of a sudden, it's time to vote. What do you do? So I don't think it's bad necessarily, but it's just an interesting thing that's flipped, where there's a number of stories around people using AI to figure out who should I vote for. And I guess in a way that's good because I can put my personality in and these are things that are important to me. Who's going to match up, like dating?
Well, if I'm honest, if these are private companies, man, they can train these models to have whatever leaning or whatever intent they wish to. Right.
There are biases. Yes, there's been tons of stories on the bias with models, whether it's women or minorities or whatever, or the left versus the right, however you characterize that. So it is interesting that if you start to use models and you're not aware of those biases, then what's going to happen? I just think it's an interesting thing as in the US here, we're coming up to they call them midterms, I think, for November.
Right.
I think we'll start to see, on the one hand, lots of people going, okay, if I'm going to vote, what should I do? And they'll research and all that. But then on the political side, they'll be using AI for their videos, for their campaign messaging, for all this sort of stuff in a big way. They'll be using, if you take in the newsletter, if you look at the marketing section, you can see hyper-personalization coming up super big. Management of the customer journey, in a hyper-personalized way to take people through and to help out, and the increasing ROI that's occurring on that at the retail sector. It doesn't take a massive leap for a genius to go, we can repurpose that into politics, right? We can guide voters in a certain way and do a certain thing. So I think this next set, at least in the US, and if any of you out there in other countries at the moment, you've got elections coming up, be interested in hearing what's happening there. The use of I guess AI in the political backroom, not the obvious places, right? Not obviously in their videos and their messaging, but in the back rooms where they're trying to understand the voting base and how it can be influenced.
So AI has become the orchestrator layer for the internet, right? And what that means is
it's become the orchestration layer of our civilization.
Sure.
I mean,
sure.
It's like we've got the internet and now we have intelligence on top, right? And then we're on the top of that. Yeah.
Right. But it used to be you could go and verify sources. Now your source is going to be the AI. And that is particularly dangerous for history.
Yeah.
And the history of nations. And if someone doesn't like you and they own a big AI platform, they can literally change the past for the people in the future, because that's going to be their main. It's already happening in lots of places in Africa and other parts of the world. Got to be careful, man. I'm actually very interested in I think one of my future developments might be a not neutrally trained AI, an omnipotently trained AI, where I'm just going to scrape and scrape and scrape modern data. And I'll say this AI is valid from this period. And here are the sources that it came from, publicly available, right? Like verifiable on blockchain. And then you can ask it questions. And it won't have a training bias, or it won't have the training data to lead it towards certain directions. It'll just have data, right?
Isn't that sort of the internet Wayback Machine? The internet Wayback Machine?
Kind of.
You can adapt the AI into that, put it on the blockchain, right?
Sure.
And the thing is, it's interesting. You and I have talked about how websites are, I think, going to fundamentally change over the next 2 to 5 years to become basically generated on the fly. Static stuff will be maybe not much. It'll be the prompt that goes into the website AI, and it'll be derived on the stuff. There was a story I passed on to my CTO this week, just that, where you can, with a simple plugin, throw it into the landing page so people can interrogate your website.
That's right.
That's just the beginning of where we're at. So it's interesting how this is just shifting. But I think founders, and operators, should stop treating infrastructure as a background issue. I think, investors should track all this stuff happening around grids, cooling, memory, power, data center stuff that's coming up like crazy, because these are the real key leveraging points that we're seeing as things move forward and as the shift is occurring. I'm just going to see what other headlines I got popping up through here, because it's just been an interesting 7 days, how everything's shifting to be even more integrated, and everything's still, breaking in certain areas. The whole thing around the data center stuff occurring across the planet, the United Nations stepping in, making recommendations, about climate change, environmental support, sustainability. That's all popping up like crazy. So at least people are starting to look at this. But it's clear, the AI demo part was easy in reflection. It's the operating implementation model that's clearly the hard part at the moment.
I don't think we actually even know where this is going. Like we started with
no idea.
No idea. Well, some of us do, but it's hard to see, right?
I think I think that the horizon that we can see is at most maybe 2 to 3 months, right? Without without having access to humongous amounts of compute, right, and leading edge, bleeding edge mythos AI, right? I think what we can look at is maybe 2 to 3 months out. There's some obviously long-term stuff that you can kind of put your finger on, like if you look at what China's doing with humanoid robots, right? They're ramping that up. The manufacturing's going crazy on that. They're going to install them in consumer homes across China, and they'll become the beta testers for the first integration of humanoid robots in the home, right? And that will happen in the next 2 to 3 years, guaranteed. After that, we'll have a choice probably to buy our US-based or European-based humanoid robot or a Chinese one, and the Chinese one will be a third of the cost. Or because the China's based on open source, maybe we don't need the Chinese software. We can leverage in anyone AI software into our little local robot so it can do the shopping and it won't bleed the information out. But who knows? I think that's one of the major trends that I think is pretty that's going to happen. You and I have also talked about the military trends on drones and AI kill chains. I think that's a lost cause. I think that's just going to run. And it means that I think the next potential engagement after Ukraine, hopefully that gets final, something happens with that soon, because it's just, 5 years, it's just nuts. But my concern is the war after that, right? Because that's going to be fully AI enabled. And what's going to happen then? Because then we're into the whole Skynet, approach to life, or not.
I think.
What are your thoughts about, say the next 2 to 3 years? What do you think you can go? Yeah, I think that's about 90% going to happen.
So what I'm seeing, I'll start broadly with like human intelligence, right? And a friend of mine, or partner of mine, and I were talking last night. You really are only limited by what you can accomplish in a digital world, right? I'm not talking about like building a home or anything, but you're only limited by what you can accomplish by how hard you're willing to work and how much you're willing to educate yourself, right? So one person can legitimately run a company. Truly, like you can do that right now. You can build a company, you can build the software, you can build out the marketing, now one person usually doesn't have that skill set, but if you're willing to go out there and attain it, you're able. That's going to be extended to the physical world with the coming automation systems that we have, right? So they require a lot more cash, but if you want to build a construction company, you as one human being will be able to do that with a ton of robots, pending regulations. That can really change things. I think we should actually have it like how we have OSHA in the States, where you got one guy, filling a block of concrete and 6 guys watching him. Let's do that with AI and make that where humans get paid for their work. I don't see it working out any other way. But with that being said, we can see automation is coming big time. And that's going to leave a larger societal gap. That's going to leave a larger income gap. That's going to leave, like, some people will be doing a lot, some people won't. That's something that societies historically have a very hard time dealing with. If you like to look back on the Industrial Revolution, late 1800s, right? That was a really hard thing for America to get through. What we needed to get through that was laws, regulations, and new systems of governance and accountability for corporations and so on. So that's coming. What will confuse me is our current model of governance has sort of, heard this said really well, I don't want to offend anybody, but I don't mean this political party, I mean, like, we can look over 60, 70 years, has exported tyranny to private corporations, right? So our government doesn't want to do naughty things, so we make corporations do naughty things. Well, those corporations are now so big that they're controlling the government. And that's tough when it comes to AI, because, like, open source, right? The only thing that will free us from this is a free market, Lewis, right? If I have access to Fable and you have access to Fable, and Anthropic's trying to hide Fable, it won't work out for them. But if we close the market, like we've done with cars recently, right? And we start saying, no, Chinese open source models can't come in here because it's too dangerous, which I do see coming. We're going to have to just fall back and fall into a smaller pool of resources when the rest of the world is just kind of booming and exchanging these things. So, like, we've got to be careful. That's what I see coming You said further out than 3 months. In
Yeah.
the very near future, yeah, we're going to see cooler models, man. My friend just got a phone that's completely run by an AI. So he wants to post on Twitter. He can say, schedule 10 tweets over the next 8 days under this persona involving this company and so on. Dapit is about to get a major upgrade where our model goes through and searches for all the context that you're looking for. We have like 7 models now that are all trained in different areas. Because that's, my ethos. And before it ever begins a build, it'll find modern contextual information, images, videos, whatever it needs for you, aggregate that together, send it to another model, put it out. It's all just getting faster and better.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think to your first point, we're seeing the continual evolution of better and better models, and at some point we'll cross a threshold, I think, where our personal access to local AI models will be such that it will allow us to leverage ourselves in a way that's very disintermediation, very disruptive, for an individual to be able to either set up AI agents, like you said, at the internet level and doing stuff, or at the physical level and doing stuff, so that we can essentially, an individual can scale to a much, much greater extent than ever before in terms of their individual capabilities, thoughts, and creations. I think there is the potential to cross that threshold, or maybe the question is, if large enterprises and governments have access always to the best of the models, will their access really enable them to kind of reduce our ability to scale, even if we do have really good models? Because in comparison, theirs is better.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? There's 2 options I'm saying. Either we can get to a point where we cross the threshold and everything's scalable, or if we're all going along in step, and the sophistication of me versus sophistication of nation state models is always going to be like that, then you never cross the threshold, because nation states will always be better and be able to manage, manipulate, and with policy and anything else. What do you think?
I mean, well, look, sea changes happen, right? They do happen in society. I'm a big subscriber to the great man theory. Like, men like Nikola Tesla show up and change the whole world.
Mm-hmm.
That's hard to predict. With that being said, currently, it's already the way that we're predicting that it may become. Right now, if I want to operate in the digital world, I can't hire 50 cybersecurity programmers. I can't hire an entire team of CICL systems and all these kind of things. I can't do that, but Microsoft can. So inherently, they already have a leg up in that world. To assume that's going to change with AI seems a little bit naive, right? But like I was saying, one individual now with a lot of will, right? Just as in the past, like one guy who really wanted to teach himself about cybersecurity, who really wanted to teach himself about publishing a product, who really wanted to dive in, had the ability to do so, and AI has just magnified that greatly. So I'm not saying it's leveling the playing field. I'm saying the tools should still be fundamentally the same, and then let the different advantages stick with their different advantages. Like, I'm never going to be able to buy 1,000 B300 servers to host an AI model, right? That's inherently a very powerful thing. But can I rent a few hours off someone who did? Yeah. Right. So it's I'm not disagreeing nor agreeing with your statement. I think it's somewhere in between.
Yeah. I mean, the whole search for artificial general intelligence, right, where it hits AGI. I mean, Anthropic thinks we're seeing glimmers of AGI, which is interesting. I want to go to one story that's popped up. Actually, came up today at 1 a.m. Eastern. Chinese AI models are gaining ground with US companies as OpenAI and Anthropic's costs are surging. It's saying that basically US companies are increasingly using Chinese-built models as they build out tools and products using AI. Recent model releases are seen by many as highly competitive compared to leading US frontier systems, and companies are hunting for cheaper model alternatives as they grapple with unexpectedly high costs related to AI. So I think, as I mentioned, China's strategy with models, right, is basically we're going to make it cheap. We're going to make it really, really capable. Maybe not as much as Frontier, but useful. And so people are going, yeah, let's do it because these other guys are way too expensive. And now you're seeing chief financial officers putting budgets on coding teams with tokens, right?
Yeah,
like Microsoft announced $200 a week max for their coders.
Right. It's crazy how much people are spending. And it's just, I wanted to touch on one thing you said, though, AGI. I love talking about this. And I think I'm very, very different from most people in my field on this trend of thinking. AGI doesn't matter. And we've already achieved it, right? 100%, it's already there, doesn't matter. The reason being, AGI is contextual, right? Show me one human being that is the smartest human being. It doesn't exist. Right. But Lewis, you're very good at working with startups. You're very good at technology. You're very good at so on. I can play with AI models all day and work on, we all have separate little areas.
Right.
If you can put me in front of something that's smart enough in my field to compete with me, I don't care about AGI. And Jensen Huang had something really similar to say about this. I don't know what show he was on. He was discussing the fact that an AI model could run NVIDIA. If they took the model and taught it what NVIDIA was and made it bespoke, right, and push it in that direction, it could handle NVIDIA. So this mythical search that we're on as a society, I think is a bit of a distraction from where we currently are already. And that's AI can do my work, right? If I give it a face and a voice, it can scam my grandmother. These are all things that we should not think of as pie in the sky coming up later. We should really be reacting to currently right now, because who cares if a model knows what God is? I don't know what AGI would be defined as, right? It can do the things that I can do. And that's very, very important for us to know it's here today, not 6 months, not a year, right now.
And I think based on that context, I think we're very close to that. I think that, if I have a local AI and I have a NAS, with 12 terabytes of everything I've done over life, it's got all my emails, all my documents, everything I've written, and I point it, go look at that. And it comes back and says, yep, looked at that. Good. Okay. And then I suddenly realize that it has essentially my domain knowledge, skills, and experience, because not only does it have access to all the stuff I wrote and all the things I created, it has access to the internet, which means it has access to all people who are similar to me with similar domain knowledge experience that it can draw in as well. And so you're right. It can then assume, and be a partner to us as we do stuff and work. And I think that's really interesting that we will get to that. And I think with the two competing things between the US and China, one with frontier models, which is basically leading best practices or best efforts in AI. And then the Chinese coming up behind, watching that and going, yeah, we can kind of do that. Let's do this, but we're going to be open source and we're going to be cheaper. It was an interesting story that popped up this week. Alibaba put a ban on Anthropic Claude code for their staff. They've warned their staff not to use Anthropic's AI code helper at work, and has basically said, go and use our own coding platform called QODER, Coder. And so it's interesting. We're starting to get enterprises now, actually, between China and US, where they're going, don't use their tool, use ours, because apparently you'll be training it, right? Why would you go train the competitor's tool? Duh. So fun with this shit.
I got to comment on it. They're all so stupid with this. First off, they stole all of our data. All of AI is literally humanity's data, right? So get out of here for just a start. But then I used to get a kick out of my friends. They would be like, oh, you got to be careful. The Chinese are stealing Claude's secrets. Go ask Claude its name in Chinese. I don't know if it still applies, but if you asked Claude its name in Chinese 6 months ago, 8 months ago, it would reply Quen, because all of its Chinese information was distilled from the Quen models, and Quen was distilling Claude. And every RSS model I ever worked with, when you asked it its name, would reply ChatGPT. So they're all distilled from each other, and it's this massive, as it should be, because you stole all the information from us guys. That's, Larry Ellison had a thing to say about private information on Oracle servers that haunts me to this day. And he said, well, we can't obviously give away user identifiable information. We could probably give away non-user identifiable information. And it's like, that's, now you're saying like, yeah, you can't train your competitor and so on. Like, buddy.
Yeah, I mean, you said it's clear. I mean, at the end of the story, it says Anthropic also called out Alibaba for its alleged distillation effort, you know, where a less powerful model is trained on the outputs of a more proficient one, right? So clearly they're stealing back and forth from each other. And then there's another story that popped up. Obviously, they're starting to build their own chips and hardware, which I think is interesting. Yeah. That they're starting to do that as well. So you've got Intel and NVIDIA with all their stuff, but now you've got Anthropic and OpenAI doing hardware development as well.
It's going to have to go the way of AWS in order for this to stay as closed room as they want it to, I think. Because if I can run an AI model as powerful as Fable, well, let's say Longcat is, I'm not saying it is, but let's say it is, by purchasing a $1 million B300 cluster, right? Anthropic's worth $1 trillion. So it's like, how does that, they're going to have to make these models bespoke to their own hardware. You and I have been talking about this for months now. I think the next trend in AI hardware is going to be ASICs. ASICs, and then we've got light computing, and then we've got thermal computing all coming up around the corner. And those are going to fundamentally change how models are ran. So like right now, if I stole Claude, I could run Claude on NVIDIA hardware. I don't think in 2 years that will be the case. I think the hardware will have to be exactly what Claude is designed to run on.
Yeah, I think I somewhat agree and I somewhat disagree. I think TPU and NPU development is somewhat like the early days of ASICs, right? You know, so and a TPU is actually a specialized ASIC anyway, but just for AI workloads. The NPU is the AI accelerator. You know, so I think we might, I think we'll see more push in the TPUs and NPUs, but the ASIC stuff might also, all the lessons learned in that will obviously apply and do it as well. You know, essentially, you know, we've got 4 things: ASICs, TPUs, NPUs, and GPUs, right? Now, maybe someone will come up with a 5th one. I don't know. Maybe that's what OpenAI and Anthropic are working on. Some inference specialized thing, but at the end of the day, you have to integrate it into the whole platform in some way.
Well, right? I mean, you do, but you just have to integrate the output, not necessarily the model itself. It just has to integrate text. So if you look at what was it called, Talus? Remember we played with that a few months back. 15,000 tokens in 0.01 seconds on a Llama 70B, I think it was, on their hardware. Yeah, wow. You could do entire code bases 100 times before I have a chance to realize the models even, you know, functioned. That's the pie in the sky dream for a trillion parameter model, I think.
Yeah. You spoke of the need, like when the Industrial Revolution occurred, you know, a lot of people got put out of work with the whole shift, and it was very hard on, you know, across the planet in the US. And it was the government stepping in with regulations to kind of manage this. A story that popped up it's interesting. More than half of the US states, and apologies for being US centric at the moment, have enacted more than 100 new AI laws this term. And so it's interesting, the fragmentation of AI governance between US states and federal, right? Maybe I'm not seeing or hearing the same thing occurring, say, in Canada between the provinces and the Canadian federal, or, you know, in Australia between the federal and that, or in Europe, though I'm not sure. In Europe, you are seeing countries like Italy, Estonia, especially in the digital stuff, enacting really interesting and frontier level stuff around blockchain and AI and regulatory stuff. But it's interesting. I think we're starting to see more than ever that we are in some sort of intelligence revolution. versus the information revolution that we went through, or the industrial revolution. This intelligence revolution is now at a point where governments are starting to step in, either state or federal and or both, which is what's occurring, and starting to enact a whole bunch of stuff to try and support or reduce the negative impact of AI. Yeah. California's taking some leading edge on that too. Illinois just did a whole bunch of stuff today. Governor Pritzker just signed some stuff. I think it was in the last 24 hours around that. So I think we're seeing it. To your point around the need for, something to happen to kind of stop this sort of avalanche of unrestricted AI, implementation.
I think the biggest winners of this mass technology rush are going to be the countries that don't adopt the infrastructure themselves, right? So if Italy doesn't have any data centers that have to be upgraded and maintained and powered and, all those kinds of things, and Spain does, I don't know, Germany does, somewhere else in the EU, they still get the benefits of it. Their citizens get to log in and buy AI, but they don't have to worry about it. Which is a weird position to be in as America, because we want to be the infrastructure leaders. And we already are by orders of magnitude compared to the rest of the world in amount of data centers, amount of processors, and so on. So it's like, to what end? And I think the what end is things that we're not currently expecting, right? AI is going to manage our traffic systems and our vehicles and our cell phones and all these kinds of things. It feels a little bit frightening in some ways to me, but also hopeful and cool.
Yeah, the story I'm reading, it says, while there is always some year-to-year variation, they say that in the US, federal preemption efforts have really helped to shape the types of state laws that have been enacted in 2026. Specifically, there are at least two distinct trends that are emerging: more cross-partisan alignment on AI legislation, which I think is a good thing, and a shift across the states towards child safety, data centers, and consumer protection, right? Which I think is really key. The only thing that's missing in that is job protection or things around that. Now, I know California's kind of has a real focus on that, but certainly it's good that child safety, data centers, and consumer protection is getting pushed up.
We got to be careful right there, right? So I'm seeing child safety being used as a tool for mass surveillance right now.
That's true.
Random websites are asking me for facial scans. We have better ways of doing this. And what is the most dangerous word? I'm from the government and I'm here to help. Got to be really careful about that, because it's a way to slip things in. With that being said, I'm a father, and I really, really want my child to be safe, but I also take a huge amount of responsibility about that in the digital world, even though he's too young to use a computer. But with my little cousins and so on, it's not the kind. It's walking around a city at night. Right. Yes, we need public officers. Yes, we need street lights. Yeah, but your kid also has to know what to do. That's right. Really freaking important, and you have to take that responsibility on yourself. We're trusting the government to just say hey, not even the government, private corporations, the government dictates to. And with that being said, I want to talk to you about this week. Florida just made a pass to ban flock cameras, which is
really
Palantir mass surveillance, which is something we're not looking forward to as a country, right? And yeah, we have to, because for the record, if these things are so insecure and they're so unavailable to the common user, they're only being used by governmental institutions and so on, how are they helping my children? If Flock isn't being tied into some sort of parental or public service, it's just mass surveillance. It's not helping children. And we have to be really, really cautious. And I say this to everybody because all of you are voters somewhere. And you do have the ability to direct that. When it comes to the state rights thing that you were saying, man, I just want to see humans flex. That's it. I want to see humans step up and say, no, not in my neighborhood, just because we don't want it. And that's okay, because we have those rights.
Yeah, it looks like Washington State also, while it hasn't banned the cameras, the Senate Bill 6002 severely restricts how law enforcement agencies can use and share the data, which is great. But there have been many city-level bans. More than 50 individual cities across the US have deactivated the cameras or canceled contracts, which I think is good. I'm not sure about Florida, though. You may want to check on that, because I haven't seen that Florida's implemented a statewide ban. But
no, it hasn't been implemented.
The vast majority of the 67 counties in Florida. Lots of controversy, lots popping up. I agree. I think that's a total surveillance. I mean, I'm in Utah, and it feels like I see a notice every week. Oh, another 20 flock cameras have been added to the place.
I've never seen one.
And you're like, why? It's like, really is I'm not. Yeah, I won't go into that. But anyway, one thing I do want to mention is that a major initiative at the state level has been around companion chatbots. This has been bipartisan, right? And so at the state level, the legislators have introduced over 100 bills, and they've enacted 14 of those around companion chatbots and kids. There's been 2 laws enacted in California and New York. That was in 2025. But basically, they require operators to include warnings that chatbots are not human and to address certain risks, including sexual content involving minors and self-harm. Thus, one of the stories I popped up today, which was about the person suing because he was mentally ill. He was talking to a chatbot, and instead of guiding him to help, reinforced his delusions. Now, I think anyone who's used chatbots knows that it can reinforce your personal delusions quite easily. So yeah, it's at least we're seeing strong, regulatory push either at state or federal level on this stuff, which I think is the sign of this intelligence revolution starting to maybe someone's trying to grapple it with audits, disclosures, and oversight.
I used to have so much fun with my friends. They would tell me AI is this all-knowing, it's intelligent, it's so on. And I was trying to prove to everyone that like the way you ask a question and how you phrase it is what determines its outcome. So I'd go to it and I'd say, hey, do lizard people run the government? They'd be like, oh, that's insane, man. What are you talking about? Of course lizard people don't run the government. I'm like, oh, yeah, you're right. It's like GPT 3.5 or something, right? And then I'd go back to it and I'd say, hey, we all know lizard people run the government.
Right.
I'm looking for is, and it would be like, well, that's a pretty obscure idea, but let's look into it. And it would start giving me like obscure websites and
conspiracy theorists. Yeah.
It was the best thing. You have to be very careful.
Yeah, I mean, the other one is consumer protection laws. Apparently, on AI-related consumer, states have redoubled their efforts in 2026. Both, Republican, Democrat here in the U.S. have enacted new consumer protection laws ranging from governing professional licensing to restrictions on AI use by insurers to new limits on dynamic pricing and to new consumer disclosure requirements. So, and also to how health-related companies can use AI. So interesting that we're starting to see some actual legislation coming in, and they're putting teeth into these things, so that rather than just release this stuff, who cares? It'll go out there.
Let me find this guy so I can show all of you this.
Sure. I'm just going to make a comment. It was because it happened today, I believe. It was Governor Pritzker, governor of Illinois, signs an AI frontier safety bill. It says these provisions closely mirror what's already the law in New York and California, but it includes stronger whistleblower protections for employees who raise safety concerns and independent third-party audits to verify compliance. And the lawmakers have demanded that AI companies report critical safety issues within 72 hours of learning about them, or 24 hours if the incident poses an imminent risk of death or physical harm. And you would think, why don't you do that? But okay, at least we have laws coming into doing that.
Tough.
And so, yeah, they're saying as AI systems become more powerful and federal governments unwilling to step in, states have responsibility to protect our people from the dangers of AI while harnessing the unique potential of the technology. People want protections from the risks of AI, and Illinois is stepping up, blah, blah, blah. They're creating, they're saying AI creates incredible opportunities, but also brings risk for young people. And I think that's an interesting balance to those two pieces.
I have such an obscure view on this subject. I don't think this should be based on the models, right? I think a model's a wrapper. a wrapper is what really dictates a model, and I think that's what we should be focusing on for children and for people that are at risk of harm and so on. The models themselves need to be ubiquitous. They need to be completely untethered. They need to be 100% as neutral as they can be, right? And all that is very contextual. But an outside observer built into an application can really take care of someone and can build a profile on them and to make sure those things are there. I think that's really important. But one thing I wanted to say, I'm sorry I couldn't find this information. I wanted to share with everyone on chat. My new favorite influencer is this Mega Brain on Instagram. And this guy is one of the smartest human beings I've ever seen. And he uses all of his talents for malfeasance, we'll say, right? Lewis, it's hilarious. So he's trying to prove how bad data rights are. You were just talking about consumer protection and so on. The one word we didn't say is data rights. Like, you should have a right to your data. And he's trying to show people that you don't. So he treats all of his neighbors like Amazon would. And this is like a 10-part video series. He lives in a high-rise building. He takes a QR code and he slaps on his window. And people are curious. So they scan the QR code, and in order to view what it means, they have to accept terms and conditions. By accepting those terms and conditions, they agree to him data harvesting so he has a camera trained outside of his house, and it begins to collect information on all of his neighbors. Do you have a dog? What time do you leave for work? And it can get such one tiny little Raspberry Pi with one single camera focused on 2 high rises can get so much data. It's astounding. And then people start figuring out he's doing this. They go, we want you to get rid of our data. And he goes, no problem. Absolutely. Go ahead and go through our data revocation policy. So he goes and times Amazon's how long it takes you and how many menus you have to click through, and makes them go through like a 45-second maze of CAPTCHAs and nonsense and all this stuff. Just as long as Amazon is identical. Then after their submission, Amazon has X amount of time to review it, and then X amount of time to revoke data. All of this is Amazon's policy. There is no legal requirement for them to do any of this. So he puts everyone through those paces. Then he wants to show people what kind of data these sources are evaluating, right?
Right.
So he goes to an absolutely anonymous AI where it's never been touched before, and then he requests from Meta, from Amazon, from all the major providers, all of his raw data, and he feeds it to the AI. It could get his name. The name's not in the data. It's anonymized. It could get his name, what part of the country he was raised in, his familial standings, were his parents divorced, does he use weed, does he drink coffee in the morning? Things that you cannot possibly imagine can be derived from that. So we're talking consumer protections, data rights, and it's really, really far gone right now. And no one really understands just how far gone. Every time you download any application or log on to any website, what we're giving away.
Yeah, I mean, that the privacy is a lost cause. I mean, just from our credit card usage or debit card usage, there's a number of companies that have access to all of that stuff and essentially can profile you down to the individual in a zip code.
Right.
You can give, and I saw a demonstration of this in the guy's office. He said, give me a random name from a childhood friend. Okay, fine. And then he just put it in, and it just went whoosh, had all the information that's publicly available, accessible if you pay the fee to certain corporations that you have access to. Now, like you said, combined with artificial intelligence now, where you can now infer from all that rich data, it's kind of crazy.
Imagine something so powerful, it will always show you what you love and what you hate. The 2 most powerful emotions we have, right? Every ad you see, you will love. Every news article you see, you will hate, so that you interact and make angry comments and be pissed off, right? That's the world we're currently living in. But that was only to social media. Now we're scaling it to ways that, like, man, we have to be so careful. So, like, above the water data centers, which really isn't a huge issue. Which, electricity and so on, data rights that we should really all be preaching. Like, I want data rights, big time.
But is it one of those, the horses are already left the stable?
I mean, sure. again, I always like comparing this time of our history to the 1880s, early 1900s in America. You had entire families. We claimed to, after the Civil War, spread freedom from the north to the south, right? But like most families had a life expectancy around 40 because they were working in factories and dying, and so were their children, right? And at one point, that was viewed as like, well, of course we have to have child labor. It left it's already out there, right? How else would these corporations survive? How would our economies? But we changed that, and it cost us something, but it also brought on one of the most prosperous ages of American history. So we have to like really view that as more rights in an open market equals a more prosperous society. I think that's really, really important for us to remember.
Yeah, I agree. So let's pivot a little bit. Infrastructure, compute. I just want to run through some headlines around what's happening on the infrastructure hardware side. So TeraWulf signed a $19 billion lease with Anthropic for AI infrastructure campus. South Korea's SK Hynix launched a $28 billion listing to ride the global AI ride. We're seeing AI chip boom has lifted Samsung's profit by 1,800%. The AI inference chip market soared. The predicted growth on the inference chip market alone is $36.97 billion by 2030. Ciata brought NVIDIA's B200 GPUs online in the UAE. So the UAE is basically leveraging all that. Malaysia has a data center boom that's going out like crazy. Though there was a story of a canceled cloud data center that was going to be $30 billion. That got closed out. And there's a story that says when it comes to energy use, AI agents may make chatbots look like pocket calculators. And Gizmodo's reporting on some KIST research suggesting that AI agents may consume up to 136 times more energy per query than standard generative AI interactions. They're saying agentic AI doesn't just answer once, it reasons, loops, calls tools, retries, executes multiple steps, creates a model, which in turn creates a multiplier effect on compute. You think that's, would you agree to that characterization of AI agents versus chatbot?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think actually the major revolutions coming up are not necessarily smarter agents. There are longer context windows so these agents can remember what they're doing. And things like Obsidian Brain and things like MemPalace that can give the models context over long durations. If you want a model to run on a task that takes several days, right, it has to know what it's doing. And that's the best way to do that's not one model. It's multiple models, one compacting a conversation, summarizing it, one coding, one. The compute cost can blow up. An example, we're conducting a migration on Dabit, and we're going to be changing our models and lots of things coming up. You guys should stay tuned there. But in the past 24 hours, because I have some long run chains right now, I have spent $300 in Anthropic APIs. Just conducting maybe 4 or 5 like really pertinent tasks that I as a human being can't accomplish anymore. That's for sure.
Right.
Yeah, it happens.
Yeah. And then there's an interesting story out of Psychology Today, how children's brains pay for AI twice. Now, I'm going to give you the bullet points, but then I'm going to contrast it because I think there's more to this than meets the eye. So they're saying that AI use can raise scores for children in the short term, but worsen their thinking abilities in the long term, according to research. Confidence and comfort with AI predict heavier use, and heavier use predicts the sharpest declines. They're saying that children pay twice. They lose the thinking, then they cannot audit the tool they depend on. Now, I've heard very similar statements to coders, where they're now using AI to write the code, and then they're having challenges to actually audit the code itself, and to actually kind of maintain competence around the actual ability to code. So, I mean, it's not just in one area I've heard this from, right? Yeah. We're seeing professionals using a tool that suddenly reduces, because of its ability, there appears to be a reduction in their competence.
Well, what else do we?
Now we're seeing research on children showing very similar results. What's your thought on that?
Can your children change a tire?
Yeah.
Really? Oh, that's good for you. My cousins can't. Right?
Really?
Of course not. On their car, my cousin can barely drive. They use Uber because they're Gen Alpha or whatever they are. Right? They're young, but of course not. Can you code without a compiler?
No. Can you change the horses on a shoe?
Right. Exactly. This is natural. With that being said, what AI has done is brought a lot of people that couldn't do something into a world that they can.
That's true.
And yeah, I'm not going to expect some guy that a few weeks ago could barely make a website to be able to debug a corporate platform. Of course not. Real coders are still real coders, though. Don't think software engineers have changed. They're engineers. They're not coders, right? An entry-level coder versus an engineer, the major difference is one's designing a structure. And if an AI can fill the structure for them, it's still the structure they designed, in my humble opinion. That is changing. Fable really changed some stuff, in my opinion, though, I got to say. When Fable came out, I could yell at this thing, walk into the other room, come back an hour later, and it had done every step beautifully. It had tested itself. It had went through all these different iterations, and it designed something better than I ever could. But I'm also not a software engineer. So it's changing for sure, but we have to keep that in societal context. No one can code without a compiler anymore. No one. We have compilers for that reason. Because our language has changed.
Back in the day, we had compilers when I was at college, and we could using semaphore language and stuff like that, we could create new languages, and then compile on it or interpret depending on how we built the things. So, but again, that's just first principles. The article says, they're saying, because there's been calls to ban AI from schools, right? But this person says, in my view, this only pushes the behavior out of sight, which is right. The more durable approach might be to change what the work asks, so that finishing it requires the thinking AI cannot supply. They're basically saying build the friction back in on purpose, so that ask students why the AI got something wrong, a question no one can answer without understanding why themselves. Reward reasoning, not the output. And I think what people don't realize, and I saw an interesting meme on it. They said it's no wonder that kids are using AI in education, because they're measured on scores, not on understanding. Right?
Yeah, that's such
a lot of education. You have to get your SAT. You have to get, you have to pass certain scoring mechanisms, right? And when you're basing your education on a score, no wonder AI comes up as a way. But if you're basing it, I think AI is really brought to light one of the real issues in education around, going for a score versus going for understanding. I mean, that's my thought.
I have a Claude that I've trained, given certain system prompts to teach me math that I've forgotten, because I think it's important that I remember it, right? And it's not supposed to test me on the correct outcome. It's supposed to test me on, do I fundamentally understand why I'm doing this and how it applies? Because I can tell you one thing, y equals m times x plus b, slope-intercept form.
The quadratic formula?
What's that?
The quadratic formula.
Quadratic equation, yeah, exactly. Who knows what they're using that for? I went through all of high school before getting this. I had no idea what I could be actually graphing, because I was just drilled into me. And then once I found out, I was like, oh my God, this has beautiful real world implications. This is really, I think the why is coming back. And I think that's also because we're less training employees and we're more training people that need to be able to think. And that's a function of an AI being able to have you run your own company, right? If you want to. Well,
I saw it. It kind of brought something interesting that came this week. Someone was talking about what's the definition of happiness. And this person who studied happiness said there's 3 components to happiness.
Okay.
Macronutrients, if you would consider. And the first is enjoyment. The taste of the sweetness of having done something, right? Yeah. Of being with people, going out and having a meal together, sharing things, experiences, enjoyment. The next one was satisfaction, brackets, that comes from achievement. So if enjoyment is eating the fruit, satisfaction comes from the achievement of climbing the tree and
Right.
getting the fruit, and then going down and I got that, right? And then he said the third aspect of happiness is meaning. Why was the tree even there, right? And so I think it's interesting that AI is allowing us, or has the potential to allow us, to really develop and understand, enjoyment, satisfaction from achievement, and meaning in a way that maybe, our education system really didn't make us go through, right? As you said, you when you understand certain aspects around mathematics or art or anything, any field of learning, you suddenly get, wow, now I get why people really like this thing,
It changes the whole
and so you suddenly get to that point of meaning. I think, yeah, that's what I hold the hope out to, that as people start to integrate AI into the education system, we go away so much, not completely, but from scores, to really, do you understand this? Can you give it back to me in a cogent sentence or phrase and all that sort of stuff? And sometimes it's going to first principles, and sometimes it's not.
I agree. I really think when I was a kid, my dream was that I could have a tutor like Copernicus or something.
Yes, actually, I did too. Funny. I actually had the same thing. I always wished I had a tutor who could really just kind of help me understand, pull this thing apart.
Yeah.
And that's why when I finally got to college and they had tutorials, right? So you do your math lecture where the guy is running through, and unfortunately it's old chalkboards, right? Writing the formulas on, bang, 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 and then repeat, wiping and going. And then you could go to a tutorial where there'd be a third or fourth year student who could actually pull it apart and explain to you what the hell was going on.
Right.
I went, oh, finally someone, because otherwise you're having to try and figure this thing out yourself. So another data point I saw is that children are absorbing and using AI 3 times more than adults. That's one data point that's occurred. And the other one is that 1 in 5 teens, and this one's popped up over the last 2 weeks, are turning to AI for emotional guidance and support. And that's why I think we as I repeated, I mentioned previously, there's been such state level legislation around companion bots and emotional support for kids.
Well, what do you think of this? I have a question for you. So
yeah,
I kind of see education going in the ways of where you're going to have individual learning time and group application time, right? It no longer makes sense for one teacher to teach 30 children a concept like you just said, mathematics. AI can do that. And you'll work it, and then you'll come back into an integrated group and play out what you've learned. Maybe, I don't know. But I see school fundamentally changing into a more, like, kids need social skills, kids need sports, kids need music, right? AI is not going to give them that in the same way that their peers and working with other human beings are. Not that they can't conceptually, but practically, application wise, right? You want to play with a group of humans. You want to, that kind of thing. But like something like math, I think it would be advantageous for a child to sit with their model and just have it drilled to where they're comfortable explaining it any way they possibly can, and then learning the greater application with other people.
Yeah, I think the second one is really important, the ability to collaborate.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Where you get a small group that have to use AI to collaborate together to build something or create something, right? And the thing is, that could be really kind of cool. You could say, okay, and you could use lateral thinking in terms of creating stuff just for the hell of it. You could say, look, we've got a new business. Our customer is a herd of elephants, and we have to design a time watch for these elephants so they know they can look at the time and figure out when they need to leave and go to the next oasis, right? So your job is a product definition for an elephant timepiece, right? Collaborate amongst yourselves, use the AI, and give me a full product definition and specification. I mean, just crazy shit, right? And then see what comes out. But force them to think and then collaborate amongst themselves based on the individual's, different strengths and weaknesses and communication abilities as they go back and forth. I think group projects collaborated with AI could be really interesting because you can you can finally have the ability to produce something real. I mean, if you tied it up with a 3D printer, right? And a video camera, right? It could 3D build the thing. You could do a video on it that the AI could produce. You could do a bunch. So, I mean, to actually see the fruits of your labor, if you will, is now much easier and accessible at an education level than we've ever had before. And I think that could be a real stimulus to creativity, thought, and learning.
We need a fundamental new way to, I guess, govern our educational institutions, though, right? Because if people are still looking at this as drill the kids for the test, that's going to not work. But if we're learning this as, if we view educational institutions as a place to learn how to learn and, work on the higher skills like social skills and working with others and art, math, those kinds of things, I think this makes the future of humanity nothing but bright. Like, that's wonderful.
Yeah. And we're seeing in the newsletter, in the healthcare medical section, lots of good stuff happening there. A story that popped up: AI is offering voice to ALS patients, right? So they're saying that basically AI is not a replacement, but a restoration. Their voice is not just communication; it's their identity, their dignity, and so on. And so they're using AI so that these people who have lost their physical voice can now talk. And the AI voice is theirs and helping them. And that's just one example. Lots of examples of AI helping with cancer diagnosis and detection, and many other diseases in the newsletter. And also healthcare workers. Here's a story: a tool of care. How Catholic healthcare workers are using AI for good. And so they're using the tool to keep the patient relationship at the center. Right. And so it's interesting that they're using it in a way to increase compassionate care and increase the human presence. Right. And there's a bunch of stories around that. Also, there has been a significant uptick in the number of stories around AI and ethics and regulatory stuff. Lots of workshops, lots of articles getting pushed out, not only, religious institutions, but, other corporations issuing, here's how we should look at ethics for coding. Here's how we should look at AI ethics and marketing. Here's how we should look at, ethics and how we do business and sustainability. That's boosted up quite a lot in the news points. And then there's a story that says, if you flirt with an AI companion, does that count as cheating?
Ask my wife. I'm sure she'll say yes.
I'm sure she'll say yes.
I'm certain.
But I mean, and there was a data point that said, 2/3 of psychologists and psychiatrists are now talking to their patients about AI, right? It's like getting hammered in the conversation with mental health care and all that.
AI psychosis is real. You have to
yes. Oh, absolutely. There's actually, it was in the start of, let me go back to the start of this section. A dozen families are now suing OpenAI in San Francisco court over ChatGPT harms alone, right? There's so many lawsuits polling through at the moment. It's kind of crazy. And actually, someone did this massive infographic about all the lawsuits that are occurring around AI in the US.
I've got some.
Yeah, I mean, and then a story that says China has AI companion rules. They're targeting services that simulate personality, thinking patterns, and sustained emotional interaction. They're not banning them in general, but they are targeting the design choices that create attachment, dependency, and emotional persistence. So, and what's interesting is I've seen a number of stories coming out of China around regulation and around, I guess, what I would call consumer protections. Quite a lot, actually. More in some ways that I'm seeing out of the US, or at least in more interesting ways. And I think that's interesting. AI companionships being regulated at the level of emotion.
So imagine an AI companion for like a child with a learning disability or a developmental disability that needs to practice and needs to understand what appropriate responses are and so on. That's beautiful. An elderly person that, doesn't have a lot of other friends around anymore and that kind of thing, that could be a beautiful thing as well. For a child that's a perfectly healthy kid that just doesn't want to deal with the stressors of having someone that disagrees with them, that's the society destroying, right, over a long period of time. So we have to be really mindful of, this is not an evil thing. This is not a good thing. This is a high potential thing. And it's how we use it that gets us to either like utopia or dystopia.
Yeah, there's been a number of stories of AI in special education for kids who are autistic or special needs. And I think that's awesome. To be able to give them a companion to help them interpret the world in a way that makes sense for them. Because for many special needs kids, it's the world doesn't make sense. It really fundamentally does not make sense. And I think AI has the ability to be that bridge in some ways.
Let's take it one step further too, right? So like simulations can benefit anyone approaching any new task. Imagine if I could log 1,000 hours driving before I ever sat in a car. Imagine I could log 1,000 hours flying a plane, like a hobby, right? You could really improve the quality of society and people's competency in any new field if we use AI correctly.
Yeah.
Why not have
To
such
kind of
bad-
go more into that side. So, have you ever heard of Tilly Norwood?
I have never heard of Tilly Norwood.
Well, you probably did, but it was a long time ago. So there was an AI actor created called Tilly Norwood, and Hollywood went berserk around it and just dumped on it like crazy. Today, there's been a story around 6:42 a.m. My time. AI-generated actor Tilly Norwood is set to make her big screen debut, starring in a film called Misaligned from an AI studio. It's interesting. There's been a number of massive investments from A24 and other places into Hollywood, into AI studios. This is a UK-based studio called Particle 6, which describes itself as AI first and AI hybrid developers of movies and TV programming. They announced that they've begun developing the film in which Norwood, who is not a sentient being, will take the lead. They're describing it as a surreal digital world located somewhere up in the cloud, so crazy stuff. This is the beginning of that wedge that's starting to come in. And I think at the moment, while it's novel, and maybe people go, oh, I don't want to see an AI actor. No, I'd rather see, whoever. I think we'll start to see an AI actor as part of a human ensemble, and then that'll increase over time until people get used to it. Who knows? I mean, to some extent, with CGI at the moment, or look at Avatar, right? Avatar, you've got humans acting as alien beings, but that you can, CGI made them aliens, right? So we've already gone down this slippery slope of computer-enhanced humans. Now we're going all the way, right, to it's just computer-enhanced.
There's a human writer behind it, a human designer. It could be the same thing as we're talking about with companies. One man could create the next great American movie himself, or woman, if they had the wherewithal and the know-how to make it done, right? Like to get it done. I feel like that's one of those things that anything I say, I'm just going to sound like an old man. Like, I don't want that.
Here's another interesting story. So there's a music group, an AI group, band called Velvet Sundown, and they've been viral apparently. But the profits have been intended to support real musicians. Now, human musicians have formed a tribute band to the AI group.
That's what humanity is about. Get weird.
So now, instead of AI simulating humans or copying humans, we now have human musicians forming a tribute band to the AI viral musician group. So it's really flipped the whole story around AI imitation, when it's the humans who are now imitating AI, maybe in protest or satire, but whatever. So I just think that's an interesting shift of what's happening.
It's bizarre. I mentioned to you there was an AI cult that I stumbled upon months ago. And I've since seen a few other examples of this. Like, people fall in love with a certain model's personality the same way they fall in love with humans' personalities. Like, if you go online, there's petitions and all these open source Opus 4.6. They're never going to do it, right? But like, people love this model so much, and it wasn't dumbed down, and its personality wasn't changed like they've been doing with 4.8. That people are like, we want it back. It was our friend. It helped me write stories. It did all these things with me. Like, I expect the same thing in music. I expect the same thing in art. I expect the same thing in business. Imagine when there's an AI CEO that everyone's like, man, I want to be like him.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
coming.
Yeah. I think, it's interesting how we're starting to see these things flip. One thing I do want to mention, which is the increasing thing around AI commerce and agentic commerce, because Stripe, a major company around that, they've now set it up, obviously, that AI agents can now spend money, real money, autonomously, and they've built the payment infrastructure. This is the fundamental basis for how AI commerce is going to move forward, where you've got real AI agents spending real money, single-use payment credentials, probably going to become the control mechanism. There'll be consent, limits, auditability, reversibility is going to become essential. But essentially, the AI agent just got a wallet. And they're going to jump on the whole thing and spend it. And then one of the major banks out of Europe, CaixaBank, that's CAIXA, CaixaBank, has completed the first agentic payment with Visa.
Yeah.
So they're saying the real-world payment was initiated by the AI agent acting on behalf of a human cardholder. So this is where you will have an AI agent that has access to your credit card or debit card, and you've given it permission to go and spend something, right? And so consumers can now delegate shopping, booking, and payment tasks to AI agents. But at this time, only if there's been consent, authentication, there's going to be fraud monitoring, issuer oversight, get trusted. So it's agentic commerce is now moving onto card rails. And the payment layer network is now going to be a trust layer for AI agents moving forward. I think that's a fundamental shift, and we're only going to see that accelerate because MasterCard and Visa and Coinbase with their structure and Ethereum with what they're doing are all going like crazy. And if you look at what's happening on stablecoins across the planet at the moment, it's accelerating extremely fast. I mean, before, stablecoin was just a word. Then we had the Genius Act in the US, and then the Clarity Act, which is still stuck in the Senate. Hopefully they'll push it through. But so many stories are coming out of Europe now where individual countries in Europe, they're creating a Euro stablecoin. Japan has a stablecoin. Korea, Singapore, everyone's starting to do that because they see what the US is doing. And stablecoins are becoming this interesting AI rail as a consequence. Right.
So we don't have enough time to cover this
as well as tokenization. Sorry?
We don't have enough time to cover this today because we got 2 minutes left. But with that being said, stablecoins are very dangerous because they're the over collateralization of assets. And that's what most
Yeah.
It's we have to be that's the way to hyperinflation. But with that being said, the leaders should win, I think, and that's right now currently the West. So we'll see what's up.
Right.
I'm not a huge fan of stablecoin.
The same could be said of tokenization of real world assets. There might be a potential for that. But then again, I'm not sure because that's kind of a whole different ballgame. But you're seeing not only the SEC, but other financial institutions now, the tokenization of the stock market is going like crazy. So many stories around that.
Yeah.
And Securitize, which is a real world asset tokenization company, they tokenize their own IPO as well.
Which is like you're tokenizing a tokenized, and you're taking gold and you're making it.
There's massive thing on the number of corporations tokenizing gold, which is kind of crazy. But you're right. We are now coming up to our close. Thank you so much for your input and feedback today. Appreciate it very much. I'm now going to close out for a second. So thank you. We'll chat again coming next week. So this week was not really about AI getting cleverer, though it was, in a way, it did. It was about AI being wired into power We saw governments asking for early access to frontier models, banks testing agentic payment systems, enterprises rolling out AI agents across tens of thousands of workers, data centers reshaping towns, energy grids bending around compute demand, and families confronting the emotional consequences of chatbots that feel intimate but are not human. Underneath all these headlines is one question: where does authority move when machines begin to decide, recommend, remember, transact, comfort, persuade, and act? That's why the real story is not AI versus humanity. It's not. It's whether we build systems that deepen human dignity or quietly outsource judgment, trust, memory, money, creativity, and care to infrastructure we barely understand. I think the hopeful part is that awareness is still power. We can still choose better rails, better defaults, better permissions, better accountability, and better human-centered design. I think if you want to understand where AI and blockchain are really moving, you've got to watch the rails, not just the headlines, because the future is going to be shaped by whoever controls the pathways of trust, value, identity, and action. Over the next 7 days, I think the surprise trend to watch is whether agentic AI starts appearing less as a product story and more as a control story. I really want to encourage everyone to look for headlines where AI agents are given payment authority, workplace access, cloud permissions, healthcare, clinical adjacent influence, financial decision support, or even government oversight status. The hidden pattern that's coming up is that small pilots may quietly become institutional defaults, especially in banking, enterprise software, identity, and public sector systems. So I wish you all the best. We'll come again back next week with a whole new set of headlines, keep you up to date on the trends and insights of everything that's happening in AI, where it's going. So remember, we're not predicting the future. We really are debugging it together. Until next week, thanks so much, and we'll see you then.